Welcome to another episode of Threes and TDs, where we talk all about football, basketball, and anything else that's going on in the sports world. Well, we've got some breaking news. Russell Wilson has signed an agreement with the New York Giants, and that's going to be interesting. We're going to see what happens with that. But it looks like it's a one-year deal, $10 million guaranteed, potentially $20 million with incentives. I'll need to go back and check that out. But this does change the landscape of what happens at the draft. Because if you look at the reports that are coming out, they're saying he was essentially guaranteed a starting job with the New York Giants. And that is very interesting. That is very interesting. Does that mean that Shedeur is not at play for that third pick? That's going to be really, really interesting. I don't hate this play. And the reason that I don't hate this play is if you're Brian Daboll, if you're John Mayer, if you're Joe Sheen, if you do not like what Sanders brings to the table, don't draft him. Now, does that put Sheen and Daboll in a really precarious situation? It most definitely does. It most definitely does. And the reason that it does is because they have this year to figure out. A lot of people thought that they should have left a while ago. A lot of people thought that they shouldn't even be in the position to have the job that they have right now. So they've got a year to figure it out. What I'm curious about is what were the conversations that were happening even before this occurred? What were the conversations? Because if I'm Brian Daboll and I've got 1 year left, I don't know that my option would be Russell Wilson. Look, Russell Wilson was really, really good in Seattle. Really, 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 really good in Seattle. Since he left Seattle, he has not been very good. And some might argue that 1 or 2 years before Seattle, he wasn't very good. Russell can launch the ball downfield. If you look at any stat, any metric, any of that, he's phenomenal at that. Like, he is so good at just launching go balls, launching go routes. He's really, really good at that. The problem with Russell is that everything else is not great, and he's older. He's older, and he doesn't have the legs that he did, so he can't scramble. And remember, all the reporting coming out of Seattle was that there were some disagreements on the way they wanted him to play. They thought that him using his legs would be incredibly beneficial, and he was like, I'm a pocket quarterback. Can we talk about, if Aaron Rodgers ends up with the Steelers, which it looks like now it's like, where else are you going to go, Aaron? If you don't want to go play in New York, where are you going to play? The Steelers are your only option, or you're going to have to retire. So to me, it's going to be, there's some potential hard knocks, really interesting conversations that are happening now. Can you imagine Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson having conversations? We got to mic that up. If we don't mic that up, what are we doing? I don't hate it for New York. And the reason I don't hate it is the difference between good organizations and not good organizations, for lack of a better term, is good organizations draft the players that they want to draft. They don't reach. If Sanders isn't your guy, don't draft him. So a lot of Giants fans are going to say, oh, well, what's going to happen this year? Well, you need to draft well. If I was New York at 3, I would trade back. Let another team come up. If Dallas is done with the Dak Prescott experience, let them reach and give you a couple picks. I don't hate it, but the only way this works out well is if you draft well this draft. The reason the Eagles are as good as they are is because they hit on players. The reason the Ravens are as good as they are is because they hit on players in the draft. So if Sanders isn't your guy, then I'm fine with it. If I was the Giants, I would probably draft an offensive lineman. That offensive line was not great. They probably need another wide receiver next to Neighbors and Slayton, but there's also defensive needs. This team is years away from contending for a Super Bowl, but to me, I don't actually hate it. And it's the same reason why I didn't hate the Jets going with Justin Fields. If you know that you're not going to contend this year, then don't reach on a guy. And it sounds like potentially, I don't know, maybe Sanders is at play at 3, but who knows? It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I'm just very, very curious as to what's going to happen. But my guess is that this probably came from somebody that's a little higher than Brian Daboll. Because if I'm Brian Daboll and I'm a quarterbacks coach, I don't know that I want Russell Wilson to be the guy that I'm going to war with for my job this year. I don't know that that's the guy. I'm not sure. So it's going to be really, really interesting what happens. We'll see what happens. Once again, from a business decision, I don't hate it. But you have to start hitting on draft picks. The reason I like the Jets situation a little better than the Giants situation is because they know Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, he knows what a winner is. I don't trust the Giants' ability to draft well, and they're going to have to draft and hit on some of these picks. So anyways, we'll have more reactions tomorrow. See you guys.